What are you talking about today?
Well, I've got a lot of backlog
Nietzsche.
of books to review and stuff like that. So
I know.
this is well, you've been doing a lot of work writing stuff, and it's a lot more important to actually write stuff than it is to read stuff. You've done a lot of.
Depends. I mean, it's only important to write stuff if you've read stuff.
Of course, but you've been doing a lot. Well,
Yeah.
you've done a lot of reviews.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing when you're writing poetry. It's best not to be just reacting to stuff that you're reading now. You got to have stuff that's under your belt from way back when, and not just reading, just like living, like hiking or whatever, right? So this is volume 1 of Nietzsche's collected books. So it's his works in 3 volumes. So this is in the original. So a while back I finished up.
That German actually sounded really smooth.
Yeah, believe me, it's wrong.
That's why you said it quietly?
Not really. It's no,
I have
don't
some
really
of your
care.
soup on my hand.
So I finished up Die Geburt der Tragödie. I don't know exactly where it probably should be Tragödie, but oder Griechentum and Pessimismus. So that's kind of like Griechishness and pessimism. And Die Geburt der Tragödie is the birth of tragedy. So this was basically the first thing that Nietzsche put out. And he was very enthused about German nationalism at this point in time in his career. I think it was 1872, and that might even be the exact date when it was published. And he was very enthused about a particularly virulent nationalist back then by the name of Richard Wagner, and yes, that is the German composer. And he was very enthused about not just Wagner and his various attitudes and ideas about his music and so on and so forth. So he had this idea that, you had old nations, cultures, they tended to be Apollonian, which was kind of like above it all. Really kind of weird, common. But he thought new nations had a kind of a tragic sense of life or something like that, tragic sense of culture and so on and so forth. And he saw that as somehow being positive, and I'm not sure how he could get that feeling, but at any rate, he kind of turned it around. He turned on Wagner, he turned on German nationalism. Big trouble is he didn't really turn on, he believed in classical culture, and not classic culture, but classical culture. Part of what came of that is belief in slavery. So weirdly enough, and the way it's was presented by Walter Kaufmann, who translated pretty well everything Nietzsche published in his lifetime, and even though it's published after. And then something called The Will to Power that was published after Nietzsche died. I suspect it was never really quite ready for publication. Walter Kaufmann kept saying, he's not anti-Semitic. Dude was against Judeo-Christian culture, and he was against Christian culture because it came from the Jews. So there is a certain degree of anti-Semitism, or at least anti-Judaism or Judaphobiaism, whatever you want to Judaphobia, in Nietzsche's thought, and this was all the way through, I'm afraid. So there's a reason, many reasons I think, why Nietzsche was the misguiding light when it came to the thought of Adolf Hitler. So I've gone through the first volume here, and I've actually started the second one. So it's on Zeitgemäße Betrachtungen, and there are 4 of them. So that's untimely, something like meditations, maybe almost like observations. And I think it's usually translated as untimely meditations. But I went through David Strauss, which is he was I think it was a left Hegelian of sorts.
How old was Nietzsche at that point?
1872. He would have been quite young. I think he was born 1844. So that would have made him something like 28 years old. But
Yeah, that's pretty young.
yeah, but the thing is, like, his belief in the positive values of classical slavery, and it's still there in his later stuff. He died when he was he died when basically, well, not brain dead, in 1889. So how old would he have been? Something like 45. So yeah, I think he died in 1900. So that would have been.
I don't know. I look at things a little bit differently.
Well,
I don't know. I'm not so quick to. I really. It might be just that I don't want to dismiss or condemn.
Not so quick as who?
Well, as a lot of people.
That's a lot of. That's good. Just so long as you make that clear, because
not just you.
Well, hopefully it's
no,
not me, because
you're going through it, and
no, understand. I've read everything in English.
I know. I'm impressed. You're reading it in German.
Now I'm going through.
Yeah.
So
and
like.
But
yeah. So I read it a long time ago. Okay, it's like in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm not judging it quickly. I just want to make it clear. Hopefully you're not saying that.
I'm not saying that.
That's good.
What I'm saying is that I'm impressed by how deeply you go into things. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I look at people as, well, they're human, and what was going on in their lives and this and that, and could that have influenced their thinking? How old were they? And what was common in the time, what was going on within that culture that they were a part of, or whatever, right?
Yeah, and it's important to do that, just so long as people leave it behind. But like Hitler was able to use this as inspiration or stuff like that.
Well, and I can certainly see how it could be used that way.
And Nietzsche is very popular amongst a certain type of left-wing people that call themselves postmodernists and post-structuralists and post-thought. I suppose they could say post-rational, there's a lot of post.
Yeah, they're not really left-wingers. They're yellows for the most part. Some of them are
some
red.
Some of the red, exactly.
But they're phony.
Yes.
They are such greenwashers and everything else, and they don't. Really, it's just a way for them to. Aggressively bite you in the butt. Bite society in the butt.
Otherwise I just, you get someone like Plato and I go, well, like he died. Well, Aristotle died 322 and Plato taught Aristotle, so maybe 20 or 30 years before Aristotle. So, we'll approximate 350 BC. So, over 2,300 years ago. But, there's still people, I guess, who are kind of like Neoplatonists or Neo-Neoplatonists or something like that. So, but generally, I just, you look at the pre-Socratics who came before Plato, and they had a lot of weird ideas, but I'm just going, no one subscribes to that stuff, really. So it's just you document what it was like and stuff like that. So,
but no, I find Nietzsche really interesting, and I think that I'm glad that he wrote. Glad that he lived, and I think that I'm not worried about people like Nietzsche who express their views and are creative and write or speak or think or whatever. I'm it's actually the people that use the information in other ways that worries me a lot more. I don't, Nietzsche, whatever he was thinking, whatever he was writing, it really, it's not dangerous. It's just writing. It's just, he wasn't doing anything dangerous.
Oh, well, I tend to think that way. tend to be people who love censorship and stuff like that nowadays, and stuff like that. So, like it's a weird thing about Marxists because, like Marxists are supposed to believe not in the ideological basis of things, but on the economic base of things. They literally use the term economic base. So Marx thought that ideology was determined by the economic base. Now, the big trouble is there are lots of people who don't live up. The economic base of the world should theoretically be based on computers and science and all this sort of stuff. But there are all sorts of people, because of their ideological beliefs, don't go to the limit possible of scientific development and stuff like that, rationality. And the majority of people that way in the world are that way now. The vast majority of people are that way now. They don't, even in North American society or European society, they don't, their ideology constrains how far they take science and rationality and stuff like that. And I'm using rationality not in the strict sense like where we're talking about deductive logic and Rene Descartes and all this sort of stuff. I'm just talking about being reasonable and thinking things through.
I mean, we've talked before about the law of unintended consequences and stuff like that. And I mean, whatever people think, it's good. It's good to think. It's good to communicate and try to come up with different ideas and think about society and how things are going, whatever. And but like with Nietzsche, honestly, his sister was awful.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. I guess
so
his mom was too.
Yeah, but I mean, can you think of anything, like any reason if the world would have been a better place without her in it?
Probably.
I can't think of anything that any good that came from her existence, but him.
Well, I don't know about too much good coming from him, but no, maybe less bad came from his sister, because his sister was this guy is talking more about Jewish culture, where she'd be an anti-Semite, right? Which is like Jewish nationality.
Some of his stuff was witty and entertaining.
Yeah, I know.
And
so to that extent, I'd say he was a yellow kind of guy. He'd actually applied himself. He was very good at classical philosophy. So good at the classical language. I mean, not just good at the languages. Like he'll he'll be talking about Greek drama. We'll be talking about Euripides and Sophocles and Aeschylus and stuff like that. He knows his stuff, stuff that was written in these languages. Then he knew a fair amount, it seems like, about philosophy. He was initially enthused about Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer is Richard Wagner's favorite philosopher, I suspect. But Nietzsche himself turned on Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer was a epigon, basically. I don't see where there's much difference between philosophy and Buddhism, which by the time Schopenhauer came rolling around, had been around maybe 23.
One thing I would like to ask is, you reading this in the German, having already went through it in English translation, did you find any differences?
Well, what you really need is the two things side by side. And it's been so long. But here's the deal. I'd rather read it in the original without having a crib, like a bilingual.
Yeah.
Because I was mentioning about the path of milk, right? Bad translation.
Yeah, that's terrible.
I don't know if we talked about it.
No, we haven't.
But maybe we won't, seeing who was caught by it. But I can recall when we were reading Greek stuff. This was the Church Fathers, but the same thing applied. We were working with a bilingual. The prof was quite enlightened about that. He allowed us to work with a bilingual. Sometimes it's enlightened not to work with a bilingual. I thought our Latin prof pretty got later on, when we got to the fourth level. I was just saying you're plagiarizing if you work with a bilingual. So, but we were just looking at the beginning, right at the beginning, and the kids were saying, Brock was used to it, right? The kids were saying, I was saying it too, that's not there in the original. That's not a good translation. Understand, it's like, it's considered, the prof would have picked the best out for us.
Yeah.
And we should understand about translators is they're translators generally because they're flunkies. So they don't know that they're probably just not good enough at English to really get the proper words.
But is this the sort of thing that you would say, oh, learn German for?
Absolutely.
Really? Really?
If you're interested in philosophy, you had better learn German, French, Greek, and possibly Latin, but particularly German and Greek. And if you really want to do justice to the world system, you'd better learn some old-fashioned Chinese, like the Chinese around the time of Confucius, maybe Mencius, Lao Tzu, whenever he was. They figure if he actually existed, even before Confucius. And you'd better actually learn some Sanskrit. That's why I kind of like twitting the philosophers out there. Like there's a guy who specialized in Nietzsche. He was taught by a guy I went to university with. After this university, he went to Princeton. And, I'll be asking, how much of Nietzsche have you actually learned in the original? Because when you're dealing with the humanities, this doesn't matter if you're dealing with world literature, or if you're dealing with philosophy, or if you're dealing with archaeology or history. Archaeology is a little bit different. It's purports at least to be a science. If you're dealing with anthropology, definitely. If you're dealing with sociology, who are the founders of sociology? I don't think I'm unusual in saying, I don't know if it's true, but the general consensus seems to be Durkheim, Weber, and Marx. You'd better know German if you're going to be dealing with those flunkies.
Okay,
and
so if you
got to control the sources.
Yes, if you want to be at your level learning about this sort of thing. But for somebody like me, it will take me a long time to learn languages.
Well, that's true.
And
for someone like the average prof, they don't know. But go ahead.
So wouldn't it make more sense for me to just go through it in English translation and not ever worry about learning German?
Absolutely right. I'm not requiring it to be. If you're going to be a specialist, though, like an anthropologist, I have no use for it unless they've got several languages. Absolutely none.
Yeah. Okay.
So, shall we talk a little bit about COVID? You think there's a little bit?
If you want to, go ahead.
Well,
camera
kind of got to be dealt with. So, Michael Enright, who seems to think he's the most civilized person on this planet because he's got the occasional highfalutin $11 word, polysyllabic sesquipedalian, as you might say. Had a person who was semi-critical of the WHO. And that's, again, I'm going to stress that's not the rock group, that's one of my favorite rock groups. That's that World On Health Organization, so it's more like, World On Health Organization. And this guy was saying, Enright asked him right off, where would you rate them? Like, what's grade would you get them? C minus when I'm having a bad day or something like that, bad hair day. You've got no clue. You both. This guy worked with. I think both of them were. I think the one of them was saying Donald Trump's reaction was like bordering war crimes or crimes against humanity. And I think Michael Enright said that's right. And I go, that kind of sounds like the Fox Network to me. It's just. But now Donald Trump stuff has been very irresponsible, and I think it has bordered on. Crimes against humanity, talking at the very least about bringing people back to work. Jason Kenney here, getting people back. Anyone who's doing this sort of stuff about when they barely bent the curve, much less leveled it.
Well, frankly, anybody who says or that our goal is herd immunity really should be up for wars, crimes against humanity, because there's no way.
People aren't a herd. Wake
Well,
up.
no, yeah. When you refer to people as animals, there's
Well, there's something there.
wrong,
Mhm.
and especially herd animals, because we're accustomed to killing
Killing them. We don't think that
And-
highly of them.
no.
I kind of think of cows are
And
probably pretty
so
nice
whenever
breeders.
you hear anybody referring to people as herds,
Mm.
you know that you
There's
should
something wrong.
really pay attention to
Mm.
what they're saying and who they are.
Absolutely. Pauline's the one who
and-
figured that one out, you know. It bothered me, but she's the one who actually...
And another thing about it is it's totally a lie. Because everybody knows that, like, every year you get a flu shot. I was talking to somebody and she was older and she was like, I get flu shot every year, so I don't have to worry about this because this is a flu. And I'm like, nope, you get a flu shot every year because flus mutate really fast. And so you got a shot one year for one type of flu and another year for another type of flu, and it won't cover you for this flu. So she had not understood that. And but the thing is when the medical community, or the people that you're hearing on CBC, when they're talking about developing herd immunity to a flu, they know better. They're lying to you.
I think so.
You will not develop immunity. You will either get it and survive, or you won't. You'll get it and you'll die.
It's really survival of the fittest.
It's survival of the fittest. Or the ones that happen to get to the ventilators first, or are permitted to I don't know. If you go to the doctor and it might be in your medical file, your address or something, might give some clue as to what socioeconomic or cultural background you have.
No.
And you might just be, no ventilator available for you. You know, you don't know. And really, the people who were most likely to survive from this COVID thing were the people who brought it in the first place.
The rich people.
Because at that point, they had access to the ventilators. Now you have a whole bunch of people with compromised immune system trying to fight off this, and they're not going to get access to the ventilators. So they're going to die. So
if the system
it's not
gets
only
gummed up, which is
survival
ready to
of
happen,
the fittest, if you may be the healthiest person in the world, somehow your system gets down and you don't have access to the ventilator when you need it, you're not going to survive. So that doesn't mean that your genes were not as fit as, say, the first Daisy Princess, Ruby Princess assholes who came in infected with this. They're not fittest to survive. They just happened to get there first, and they had more money or whatever. So yeah,
they say a third of the cases in Australia are due to Ruby Princess, and it's not just the people operating Ruby Princess. Shame on you, dumb pukes, who were out on a cruise at that time. Absolutely shameful. A third of the cases in Australia.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk about this a little bit later on.
Okay.
There's more stuff to deal with.